And if we're all set, then I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Chris Conway.
Good afternoon and welcome everybody to our first Colorful Conversation. I'm Chris Conway. I'm the Executive Director of the West Hartford Chamber of Commerce. I would like to start by thanking our sponsors for today's event, our gold sponsors, Liberty Bank and the North Star Realtors, and our technology sponsor, Westfield Bank. I would like to start by giving you a little history of the Minority Business Network of the West Hartford Chamber of Commerce and how we came up with these colorful conversations. The Minority Business Network was suggested going back a year ago during a board meeting where the chamber board looked at itself and looked at some opportunities for growth and expansion of our organization. And we realized we had tremendous opportunity by serving our minority-owned and represented businesses. From that meeting, Christopher Clark, who is currently serves as the chair of the Minority Business Network, suggested the formation of a committee, which was formed in February of 2020. Unfortunately, that group was scheduled to meet the day that the governor had to shut the state down because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And back then, we thought that this was only going to last maybe 60 or 90 days. And we decided that we would wait till we could be in person before we officially launched the committee. On May 25th, 2020, things changed. The killing of George Floyd caused us to look at our organization and how we could be a voice in serving our minority community a bit better and being part of the solutions to those concerns. Part of that was the chamber taking the steps to issue a statement about the killing of George Floyd, about the protests that were going on, but at the same time condemning the violent and vandalist ones that were going on as well. We continue to also stand with that. The Minority Business Network has been operating for several months now and has done a series of programs and been providing resources to our minority-owned and represented businesses. As I said, it's chaired by Chris Clark, and the group is made up of about 16 business owners and professionals in the area. We chose today very specifically for our first colorful conversation. Yesterday, our local officials were all sworn in at the state capitol, and we have all 4 of our representatives at the state level with us today. It was also to be the day after the certification of the presidential election. We could not have known then what a historic day yesterday would be, but we are here now, and we are going to move forward with this program. I am looking forward to the conversation with our elected officials, moderated by Chris Clark, and hearing from our citizens on how we can continue to serve our community and support our minority-owned businesses. With that, it is going to be my pleasure to introduce Mayor Sherry Cantor.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for joining in this conversation. Thank you to the leadership of the board for recommending that this be an important part of moving forward and growing the community and the chamber. Thank you, Chris Clark, for your leadership on the Minority Business Network. And I think this past year, and it's interesting that this was supposed to start a year ago, and what a year it's been, and how eye-opening it's been in many issues of that are directly related to minority challenges with healthcare and access to capital and so many things that define how easy it is to get a business up and going and keep it going. The PPP access, all of those things were much more challenging for many minority-owned businesses because they didn't have some of the legacy, they don't have necessarily the capital or the bank relationships. So it's networks, and it's really important for us to develop and strengthen those networks. I know we're all tired today. for so many reasons, but especially tired because I know, like most of you, you didn't sleep last night. I surely didn't. It's a heavy and sad day. There's no going back to undoing what we saw yesterday. And the peaceful transfer of power is no longer our legacy in the United States of America. I have received numerous contacts from international connections that we have, and it's just so heartbreaking. But on the flip side, we've got really positive days ahead. We've got so many wonderful people that are working on the science to end this COVID. We have fabulous elected leaders that are ready to serve, and we're so honored to have them part of this panel. And they are ethical, hardworking, empathetic, and really prepared, smart people, and I'm so grateful for their service. And I think it shows more than ever how important leadership is, and what a responsibility it is, and how much it matters. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you to this delegation, and again, thank you to the chamber and the sponsors. And I'm honored to be an elected leader, and I know I take my role very seriously. And anyway, so I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Better days ahead for sure. Thank you. Back to you, Chris.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Cantor. And I want to take a quick moment to introduce myself. I'm Chris Clark. I am the chairman of the West Hartford Chamber's Minority Business Network. And I am honored and excited to be your moderator today, to be able to be the voice that helps connect you to these amazing representatives that we have here in Connecticut. And I don't want to spend very much time on myself. I'd like to just dive into introducing our panel to you today, and echo what Mayor Cantor said. We have a fabulous panel of leaders who are ready to serve and ready to answer your questions, and to share their thoughts on the go forward for our state and their involvement in helping to support minority businesses. First, I'd like to introduce Derek Slapp. State Senator Derek Slapp was elected in the special election in February 26 of 2019 to represent 98,000 residents of the 5th State Senate District of the towns of West Hartford, Farmington, Burlington, and the western portion of Bloomfield. He had previously served one term as a state representative in the 19th House District, serving constituents in West Hartford, Avon, and Bloomfield. Derek makes his home in West Hartford with his wife, Alex, daughters Maggie and Zoe, and his son, Charlie. He is Vice President of Advancement at the Village for Families and Children, working to support families and communities in the greater Hartford area. Derek is a lecturer at Sacred Heart University and has been a lecturer in political science at Yale University and an adjunct professor at Quinnipiac University, Central Connecticut State, Southern Connecticut State, and Eastern Connecticut State Universities. In 2017, he won the Archangel Award from ARC for its advocacy on behalf of people with disabilities. Derek, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to our mayor and to our delegation members. We have a fantastic group of state representatives who, there was a really inspiring photo of them yesterday after being sworn in, and they all struck a pose, and it was really awesome to see. So I'm excited for the session ahead, and I don't want to take too much time now because I do want to spend more time listening than anything else today. But I would say that I think one of the big themes of this coming legislative session that started yesterday is recovery from COVID, of course, and also growth. And part of that is going to be lots of conversations and a focus on equity. And certainly in economic development and business, that's just one piece of it. But in healthcare, in education, and in housing. We are going to be applying the lens of equity when it comes to all of these issues. And every committee, the work that we do, we are going to be thinking about how we can make Connecticut a fair, more equitable place, and how we can root out systemic racism and fix wrongs that have been put into state statute in many cases for many decades. We've made some progress. We were one of the only states in the country to turn the momentum that came from that tragic incident with George Floyd into actual legislation this summer. But there's a lot more work to do in the areas that I mentioned, and in helping minority-owned small businesses. So, and I have some ideas about how to do that. I'm sure my colleagues do as well. But I'm also really eager, of course, to listen to other folks and to really gain kind of best practices and put that into action. I guess the last thing I'll say, I certainly don't want to be accused of filibustering, which some of my colleagues do. Not on this call, of course, but I think that the Lamont administration has made some good steps over the past year, and even just recently in the past month or so, in terms of setting up a minority-owned small business office within DECD, establishing some grants and a loan fund for minority-owned businesses. And there are just a recent round of grants that are going to be awarded. I think it's next week to small businesses. So we need to do more of that. We need to fund that robustly in this coming budget, and just have adequate funding, but I think really make sure that we invest in that as we go forward to rebuild the economy. So I can leave it there, but just want to again thank you for organizing this terrific event, and look forward to listening and learning more.
Well, thank you for that brief introduction, Derek, and thank you for joining us. I am also excited to introduce Jillian Gilchrist. Jillian Gilchrist was elected to represent the 18th District of West Hartford in the Connecticut General Assembly in 2018. Prior to becoming a state representative, Jillian served as the Director of Health Professional Outreach for the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Chair of the State Trafficking in Persons Council for the Connecticut General Assembly, Executive Director for NARAL Pro-Choice Connecticut, and Director of Policy and Communications for the Connecticut Alliance to End Sexual Violence. Jillian holds a master's degree in social work with a focus in policy practice from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work, where she has taught political advocacy. Jillian currently teaches for the University of St. Joseph, University of Hartford, and the Sacred Heart University. Jillian resides with her 2 children in West Hartford. Jillian?
Thank you so much for having me today, and I echo the comments made by both Chris and Sherry and Derek that this is a dark day, and so I just want to give space for that for a moment as we all struggle to come to terms with what we witnessed yesterday and how we move forward. I also want to thank you for putting together this conversation, and I'm so happy to hear that it's going to be an ongoing conversation here in our community and our state. I'll echo what Derek said. I think the focus of the 2021 legislative session is going to be on recovery in the state of Connecticut. And for far too long, we have had discussions about Connecticut's deep inequality, educational inequality, economic inequality, housing inequality, healthcare inequality, and the time for conversation is over. It's the time to act, and we have that opportunity as we move forward, as we continue to deal with and come out of this COVID pandemic. So today I'm really interested in listening and learning from you all, interested in understanding how COVID and the pandemic has impacted your businesses, how the pandemic relief efforts such as the PPP have either helped or hurt you, and then also interested to learn more on how Connecticut's ongoing minority-owned business supports help or hurt you all. I've heard in the past that some of these programs can be hard to access, and so I'm interested to learn if that is something you find, and if there's ways that we can support you at the state legislature. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Jillian. And to your point, regarding access, we do have some questions and some concerns from people who have submitted some inquiries to us. So we're chomping at the bit to hear your response. But what I'll do is I will introduce Tammy Exum. Tammy Rush Exum represents the 19th district, which includes portions of West Hartford, Avon, and Farmington. Representative Exum was elected in a special session in April of 2019. Tammy currently serves as Deputy Majority Leader and serves on the Commerce and Higher Education and the Employment Advancement Committees. Her other leadership roles in the community have included Vice Chair and Board Member of West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education, Coordinator/Facilitator of the Parent Leadership Training Institute in West Hartford, Windsor, and Middletown, Board Member of Unified Theater, President and Executive Board Member of Special Education PTA, and Early Childhood Council Coordinator in the town of Windsor, where she worked collaboratively with parents, early care providers, educators, and stakeholders to develop early childhood initiatives in the community. Tammy is a former elementary school teacher, holds a BS in early childhood education, and earned her MBA from Clark Atlanta University. She worked in human resources for Otis Elevator Company. Tammy and her husband Earl live in West Hartford and have 3 sons. Tammy?
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for having us on today. And like so many of you who have spoken before, I have to acknowledge that, it's a bittersweet day. I actually came into my office here today at the Capitol, and I was just reflecting, yesterday, this time it was so exciting. You saw the pose that we struck because we were very excited to be sworn in outside on the grounds here. And then shortly thereafter to come into the office and to witness the scenes that we witnessed, it was hard to believe that was, we saw dismantling, an attempt to dismantle democracy. But here in the seat of it, it's something that I hope and I don't think will prevail. They said such a thing has not happened since 1814 at the Capitol. And hopefully, prayerfully, we will move forward and heal and move on from this. I was listening to the introduction and hearing about this group and when it was formed. And I am so glad that the minority business community is coming together to have these types of partnerships and opportunities and support and resources. I am struck, though, that in a community as diverse as West Hartford, that it took acts that kind of prompted, I guess, in 2020, this formation. It is so important to have this formation, but like so many things, I don't want it prompted from tragedy. I want us to realize that we have strong businesses and that we need to understand who you are so we can best support and provide resources moving forward. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and the opportunity to know more and to learn more and to see how to be most supportive. I also would like to say, I think the theme, I agree with Derek Slapp and Jillian Gilchrist, their comments so far. Really, to me right now, the focus is on response, recovery, equity, and access. There have been so many opportunities that we have learned from this pandemic that we are going to need to go into the session really ready to take on so many different issues. But at the end of the day, we also see a lot of disparities, and we are able to now address some of these things. And I think we are so fortunate to have a delegation that is cohesive in its vision, and we're willing to work together to do what is best for our community. Thank you so much for having me on today. I look forward to learning so much more about this group in particular. I'm super interested, and thank you. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Tammy, and we're looking forward to hearing more of your perspective. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce Kate Farrar. State Representative Kate Farrar was elected in November of 2020 to represent the 20th District in Southern West Hartford. She currently serves on the Finance, Higher Education and Employment Advancement, and Insurance and Real Estate Committees. Kate begins her first term as a legislator with over 20 years experience as nonprofit advocate and active community volunteer. Most recently, Kate served as executive director for the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund and led passage of landmark paid family medical leave and pay equity legislation. Kate serves as a board member for the Betty Knox Foundation and volunteers in West Hartford for the Aurora Foundation for Women and Girls and Food Share. A Connecticut native and UConn graduate, Kate and her husband Chan live in West Hartford for its diverse community, commitment to education, and vibrant business and neighborhoods. Kate?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to my fellow members. And as said, thank you to everyone taking the time today. I think, when I saw kind of the language in marketing this event, all I could think about and was reinforced yesterday was, an election, January 1st of 2021, doesn't suddenly change racial injustice in our communities and in our country. And that's really up to us every single day in our actions as individuals, in our actions as elected officials, and even in our actions of coming together today on this Zoom together and saying that we want to do something together to support minority businesses in a new and different way in our community. And I think to me, especially going into this legislative session for the first time, it will certainly be different than it has been in the past for other legislators in this virtual format. But it really doesn't change the heart of the crisis we are still in and the crisis we need to address, and also the fair recovery we need to create. I think in the committees that I'll be serving on, I'm really most interested in making sure that our minority businesses, of which we have many in the 20th district, are front and center as we offer more affordable health insurance products, for our businesses, as we look at our budget and how we can create a fairer tax system, and really how we're making sure that our businesses have the support to just grow and have the workforce that can really be great workers for our economy moving forward too. So to me, this is about listening. We want to make sure that we hear from you as we focus on fairness, but it's really about how we take all of the lessons of not just yesterday, but this entire past years together and move forward with this focus on fairness. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to hearing from everyone.
Thank you so much, Kate. Yeah. So with the introductions presented to you, I would like to just dive in and put forward the first question that we got from one of our community members. And before I do, I just want to say that, thank you for recognizing that disparities exist. Thank you for, being open to listening and to learning today, and being willing to share your perspective to answer these questions. So, according to the New York Times, 40% of Black businesses have closed during the first few months of the pandemic. This is in comparison to 21% of white-owned businesses. While Connecticut has done a great job in creating a climate and culture that has promoted significant growth in the number of businesses being opened by minority populations over the last several years, the rise of COVID has caused several problems, and some of these initiatives have failed to hit the mark with minority-owned businesses. We're hoping that these businesses will be a priority to bring new energy and ideas to the market. So the question at hand is, what additional opportunities, plans, and support do you have in mind that will promote a thriving environment for minority-owned businesses during this shifting climate? And anyone can feel free to dive in and answer the question.
Chris, we had some trouble with your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about
Can you
that.
re-ask
I'll
the
repeat.
question?
I'll re-ask the question. So, given the shifting climate, what additional opportunities, plans, and support do you have in mind that will promote a thriving environment for minority-owned businesses?
So this is Jillian. I'll jump in. Thank you for the question. So what I've heard from folks, from small businesses, minority-owned small businesses, is that the PPP really wasn't a support for them because of that need to have established relationships with larger banks, and probably for other reasons. Again, please let me know. And so I'm interested in various ways we can support through potential grant programs. We are getting more money, and we're expected to get additional dollars through the federal government. And so interested in having conversations with my colleagues here on this Zoom, but also at the legislature, on how we can ensure that those dollars get to businesses like yours, and get to businesses like yours in a way that actually helps you and doesn't make you jump through additional hoops. Another interesting thing, and I think I learned it on another call held by the chamber, is that we do have a number of resources in the state through the Department of Labor and others that can help small businesses with developing plans, applying for grants like these, because we understand that you are likely not to have a team of folks who work the back office. And so happy to provide those resources to folks as dollars come through, so that you do have greater access to the resources that we in the state are providing.
I would add on to what Representative Gilchrist said in terms of some of the resources that exist with DECD, and I think we need to expand those. There is an office that is, specifically dedicated to helping small minority-owned businesses, but that should expand, and we need to put more resources into that. Kate Farrar, Representative Farrar mentioned, about the budget, right, and about kind of how we in fair taxation, we're going to have a lot of tough choices to make. So we need to put our money where our mouth is. If we say we believe in equity, then we need to invest in DECD as just one example. And I would add that when we talk about economic development, and the governor talked a lot about that in his address, we also need to be looking at that through that lens of equity that I mentioned earlier. And there's going to be a lot of conversations. I mean, the governor mentioned cannabis reform as just one example of, how do we go about doing that? And not just repeating, the mistakes of the past. And education is another one, and making sure that we do have that qualified workforce for all our businesses, but in particular for our small businesses as well.
And one thing I would like to add is I am really interested in making sure that we know where are our minority-owned businesses? Who are they? I found it difficult, and I went to multiple resources to ask, where is the listing of the minority, and I also asked women-owned businesses in my district, and it wasn't as easy as I'd hoped. So it makes me wonder, when there are opportunities, when there are resources, how are they pushed in if we have not identified where the businesses exist? So I think that's a really important piece, to be sure that we capture and know where the minority businesses are, so that we can be sure to connect the resources, which we do need more of, which I agree with what was spoken before, but it's hard to support. And I do see in the chat that is one option, the Shop Black CT, but everyone isn't captured in that. I know some businesses that aren't there, so I want to be sure that they're all identified, so that we can make sure resources are given in an equitable manner.
To your point, Tammy, I think there's an opportunity with some of what our Secretary of State collects with the business information, but in regards to the reporting and access to that information, how we use it to really set more goals and how we build greater networks, I think is critical. But I would just mention, I think additionally, when we talk about kind of these new grants or new resources, I think the key is, we know that pre-COVID, there was just an underinvestment and undercapitalization, for so many minority-owned businesses. And, it's coming to kind of terms in this moment of COVID that we're seeing the results of that. But it really is kind of a choice in prioritization, as we look at new grant programs for businesses. But also, I think in our own West Hartford community, hearing from the chamber continuously and how we can build bridges between our businesses that we're in touch with and you all are in touch with to give them the best resources, I think is a role that we want to play as legislators too.
Just kind of continuing with the train of thought regarding resources and existing programs. And I think Jillian pointed out a little earlier was the gaps that exist in existing programs. For instance, PPP, where there was a large percentage, some studies have estimated that it's as much as 90 to 95% when looking at Black and Latino-owned businesses that did not have access to PPP funds because they didn't have existing relationships with larger banks who were running the access to these funds. What steps can you as representatives take to make sure that those gaps are filled and that everybody has access?
So one of the things a lot of folks don't know is that when the pandemic hit in March and the legislature stopped meeting, oh, is my video not on? That's so interesting. There we go. Sorry about that. And when the legislature stopped meeting, we were still playing a very active role. And so what we can do as legislators and what we do as legislators is continue to have conversations with the executive branch as they're making decisions on how those dollars are spent. And now certainly as we have just entered the 2021 legislative session, we'll be using our formal committee process to do that. But those conversations continue. And so as we begin to hear what is being, first of all, we can go and say, and we have, I'm sure, I know I have, and others have given feedback to the executive branch, to the governor's office on what worked and what didn't work. I'm in constant communication with the chamber and with Kristen Gorski in our West Hartford Department of Economic Development to hear what's working and what's not working. And then I relay that back to the governor's office. And so as we start to hear what is being proposed with these new dollars, I'm happy to continue to have conversations with you all and feel you out on what's being proposed so that I can better understand why something would or would not work. And then as we, again, go into our committee process, doing the same. Even though I don't serve on the Commerce Committee, for example, I am in direct communication with the chair and with my chair on the House side, and then other members who serve on that committee, and can give feedback and weigh in as those decisions are being made.
So there's a constant collaboration that goes on even if you're not serving on that specific committee.
Exactly, in the committee process as well as with the governor's office.
Yeah, Chris, and I would add that there is constant collaboration too with our federal delegation in helping to secure, funding. And I think it should be there should be some specifically earmarked for, small minority-owned businesses. So it's not just, a free-for-all like we saw, with the PPE earlier, and you did a good job of kind of documenting those challenges. So I think there's improvements to be made, and especially with President Biden and a new Congress, I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to get some more support for our businesses.
One thing I'd like to add, and I'm excited, I am a member now of the Commerce Committee. We just had our first organizational meeting, so there's a whole lot to learn. This is brand new for me. I'm very excited about that though. But one thing that comes to mind for me is, again, this is about networking and relationships. And I would love to explore ways to make sure that minority-owned businesses have a connection with banking, with banks, with ways to get have access to capital. And sometimes those relationships are not there. And that is a piece that needs to be established. Even when there were, I heard recently of a small business owner who had a relationship, a long relationship with a bank, and went right out, was completely prepared, first round of PPP, and still didn't get funding at that time. But so many minority businesses don't have those resources and those connections. And that would be something that I'm interested in hearing how we could work with the chamber, what the needs are and the banking community to pull those partners together so that those connections can be in place when there are needs. So I think that is an area to definitely identify and bolster.
That's an
Chris,
excellent point, Anna.
I was just going to add one other quick thing about, I think we hear from some minority-owned businesses, particularly an access issue is potentially some language barriers. So I would also be interested, to hear from the community and hear as we come up with solutions, how they are, really cognizant of what some of those language barriers might be for some of our communities. And I know that was particularly the case with some of the quick moving elements that went along even with some of our Connecticut grant programs. So, I think we're, really open to hearing, how to, as Tammy said, how to make those better connections. But, to me, I've heard especially about some of the language barriers, and I think we just need to be kind of come up with more creative solutions about how to make sure that that's included in any of the program implementation too.
Yeah, I think to touch on what you just said, Kate, and to tie that into what Tammy said. So the importance of a network and being innovative and creative when coming up with these solutions. Sounds like an incredible way.
You keep glitching out, just so you know.
Oh, are you guys able to hear me now? Yeah, I'm just saying that tying together what Kate and Tammy were saying about the importance of. Can you guys hear me?
Whenever you
Cutting
ask
in
if we
and
can
out.
hear you, yes, but then as soon as you start talking, no.
What a day to be having sound problems. I was just saying, to tie in Kate and Tammy's points, the incredible importance of a network and being creative. I'll move on to the next question. So hopefully you guys can hear me. If not, please let me know. The second question came from restaurateurs. So restaurants play a large role in driving traffic economically, not just for themselves, but also to local retail establishments. Allowances for seating capacity in these cold months are an obvious challenge. The existing code doesn't allow for increases in overall capacity regardless of the outdoor seating and layout changes. What are both state and local plans to get increased restaurant capacity during cold months? What are some challenges you foresee to maximizing revenue for restaurants?
Reps, if you had a hard time hearing that, I put the question in the chat.
I can jump in again. This is Jillian. And my video is on this time. Okay. So I know one of the challenges that I've discussed with you all is that currently when we're talking about capacity, it's also the 50% capacity, it's also applying to the outdoor seating. And so have been having conversations with the administration to ensure that it doesn't apply to the outdoor seating. I mean, if you've invested in heat lamps and ways to keep people warm outside, and it's spaced the 6 feet, certainly that shouldn't then apply to the 50% capacity that was meant for indoors. So I'll continue to follow up on that and have those conversations. I wish that it had moved sooner, but it has not. I'm also open, again, kind of how we've all been saying, we're open to listening, but have had conversations with other folks in the community on, I know we've talked that there's been talk of gift cards, but are there ways to be creative in, can folks establish having food delivery once a week from a restaurant that they commit to for a certain amount of months? Like, are there more creative ways that we could help you to get new type of funding in from your customers who want to help but might be fearful of going into restaurants? The final piece I'd say is that I've had some conversations about other ways that we could be helpful in making the public more comfortable in actually eating indoors, since a lot of the data is showing that there's only a few bad actors, and that most folks are safe when they are eating in a restaurant. So again, more kind of questions than answers, but I'm hoping we can have that dialogue.
Well, thank you for that, Jillian. Did anyone else want to add some perspective?
Chris, maybe I'll just add that, you know, I'm not an expert on capacity in restaurants. There are, you know, I think we can learn a lot from our restaurant owners. We have a lot of great ones in West Hartford. But, you know, we are going to be for the next 3-4 months, we can only probably do so much when it comes to capacity. And I think we're going to have to be there to help support our restaurants with some grants and loans and financial support as well. Not just them, you know, but I mean, you look at arts organizations are really suffering. There's a lot of these small businesses that we're going to have to, you know, we're going to have to find ways, creative ways to keep them afloat over the next 3 months. And capacity might be a part of it, but, you know, we also, of course, need to protect public safety.
I would just reiterate, and I think we might talk about this a little more on Friday with you all in the chamber with our federal delegation, but you know, the crisis is not over. You know, we need government in its full role at the federal level and state level, and particularly federal relief for all of our businesses, and the prioritization, as we mentioned earlier, from minority owned. But you know, it's not, again, suddenly that January 1st came and the crisis stopped, or that the federal relief isn't necessary. You know, it really is an essential part of how we move forward. So to me, I think as a delegation, as a legislator, we want to make sure we're kind of making those connections for all of us and doing, you know, what's best to advocate for all of us here, also at the federal level.
Well, thank you, Kate.
I just have a question, really, and I don't know if you have this, so I'm not putting you on the spot, Christopher, but I'm interested in knowing what it is the restaurants would need, what they're asking at this point, because the virus is here. It is a public, you know, safety issue, and that's not changing, a public health issue, and that's not changing anytime soon. We do need the federal funds, just as Kate said, and that's what we need to continue to advocate to make sure we can get what we need. Is there anything we're missing, is what I guess I'm asking.
Sure. And pardon me, because I'm not a restaurateur, but my understanding of the issue as it was relayed to me was that, you know, restaurateurs, you know, understand that, you know, we are in the middle of a pandemic, we are in the middle of a public health crisis, but they're also trying to keep their doors open, keep their businesses running, and keep food not just on their patrons' tables, but their families' tables. And what they're running into is situations where maximum capacity is a set number. They may, you know, make additions, you know, as Jillian mentioned, put money and investment into heating labs and outdoor seating, but that doesn't affect their ability to have additional capacity or an additional seating number, and therefore, you know, maximize their revenue. In terms of the other challenges that they're facing, I don't know that I'm in a position to actually speak to those.
Chris, I can just jump in. We are going to have a deeper dive on this tomorrow with you folks and with Senator Murphy and Blumenthal, but certainly some of the things that have already been mentioned, the capacity issue with relation to the outside dining not fully being an extension of the space is one. And the other one is just the practically clickbait headlines that it's unsafe to do so. And then if you read the article, it's really not what the article is saying, and the restaurants of having to battle that has really been something we've heard about multiple times. But like I said, we're going to hear directly from the restaurants, and certainly if there's anybody on this that's a restaurateur that wants to submit a question, we can certainly try to address that. But we are having an event. I might as well just plug the event tomorrow. So 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, we are going to be doing a similar format with our restaurants. It's called Serving Up Support, and our 4 delegates will be there along with our Senators Murphy and Blumenthal.
I just want to add that in the chat, Jorge Castro added a couple of things that restaurateurs are specifically looking for.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Because I believe, but maybe this, sorry, can I jump? Maybe this is an issue across all small businesses, but I had conversations about the rental relief, in that while we've done a lot in the state with regards to rental relief for individuals and families, when it comes to small businesses, you are all still expected to pay your rent. And so that's certainly an area I think that we all could come together on to work on, as, again, more federal dollars come in and as we move forward in this 2021 legislative session to provide you all with recovery.
So I'll dive into the third question that we had submitted. This one comes from a member of our minority business network and a business owner in the community who owns a bakery. And as a baker, her utility bills are naturally high. Connecticut has one of, or maybe the highest energy costs in the nation, especially with the new delivery charges. The understanding is that energy costs are only going to rise over the coming year. What are you doing to help with the affordability of running a small business? And I guess by proxy, the managing energy costs within the state.
Chris, I'll just be real brief, and it's a great question. I mean, I hear all the time about utility costs and healthcare costs are huge obstacles. Utility costs, we did, the legislature came in special session a few months ago and passed a bill that is going to, taking back our grid. That was the name of the bill. And that has a lot of good reforms in it. It's not single-handedly enough, but it's going to create more public input in the rate process, the rate determination process. It's going to essentially make it more difficult for, I believe, rates to increase. We're also going to really hold the executive's feet to the fire in terms of performance. I think if you look at what happened with Eversource, it has become, the public utility part has been lost. Executive profits are soaring. Hedge funds are the major investors now. The stock price is soaring. We've had a 35% cut in the number of actual lines crews in the state of Connecticut. So, if you're an executive at Eversource, you're doing really, really well. But if you are a customer, your rates have gone up and your service has gone down. And that's a big problem. And we took a first step this past summer and fall after that storm, but we need to do more. And I do think there is a will to do more this next session. And then healthcare, and that's a whole separate conversation, but I think you're going to see some significant healthcare reforms. I think that issue was tipped in the past. Maybe it's only been, progressives or certain folks who are talking about, oh my gosh, we have to do something about the healthcare system. And now I hear from small businesses all the time, their employees are being crushed by healthcare costs and they're being crushed by them. And, Connecticut, I think, is poised to be a leader. It says that, the states are laboratories for democracy. This is a perfect example where we need to create a pool. We have got to open up, for small businesses, some kind of relief. And I think that probably is going to be some kind of public option in Connecticut.
Thank you for providing that information, Derek. That'll be incredibly useful. And, I, for one, would love to see some of the changes that are coming down the pipeline. Did anyone want to add, or did you have anything that you
I just wanted to add, I do think it's noteworthy, you know, we do have utility assistance for individuals and families and seniors in our state, you know, but we don't have as much of that significant option, you know, for small businesses. So it's a great question. And I think as legislators, you know, we can have that kind of being mindful of those needs as we kind of go into this session and are talking to colleagues about what needs to be put, not just in the budget, but, you know, as real opportunities for our business community to get through this crisis. So again, you know, it seems, you know, kind of like an obvious but necessary point to bring up, you know, that we have offered this assistance to individuals and families and seniors, but certainly it is more of a necessity now for small businesses. So it's a great point, and bringing it to our attention can make sure we can do something about it.
And I would just share that I serve on the Energy and Technology Committee, and so I will certainly bring this lens to that role. And as we talk about utility costs, speak to the importance for small businesses and minority-owned businesses here in the state.
Thank you, Kate. Pardon me. Thank you, Julian. Your advocacy is greatly appreciated. And I think it will be beneficial to our businesses and our business community here in West Hartford and beyond. Kate Coves, I know that we had a few people in the audience who were interested in posing questions to the delegation. Do we have anybody who was queued up?
I believe that Allison is on her way onto the panel right now. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you, and we welcome your question.
Oh, thank you. So my name's Allison Baraz. I'm a business manager of a periodontal office, which is a dental surgery specialty office. We have two offices, one in Meriden and one in Waterbury. All of our staff are women. Many of them are single mothers. And my question is, or statement, the failure to have childcare available full-time is a huge problem for us. If schools are not open full-time, there really should be some sort of public daycare for children of essential workers. In our dental surgical office, one of our employees who is a single mother must bring her child to work with her. This makes our office less safe. The child can potentially expose our staff and patients to infection. However, the employee is needed to work in person. What will you do to ensure that essential workers have childcare and be able to do their jobs?
I think that's a profound question and something that's on a lot of people's minds.
I'll jump in. I'm wondering, was anyone able to access the programs that we did put in place in response to COVID through the Office of Early Childhood? Did you and your staff know about those programs? It's two questions, because it would be helpful for us to know. So
we were aware that the YMCA was having a program, but other than that, we really weren't reached out to directly with that information. So
then I'll go back, find out more in terms of, would you all qualify for that? And then to me, one of the issues at hand is, how do we ensure that folks like yourself and those you work with know that these programs exist and get you connected to those programs? So it's twofold, and I'm happy to loop back. Going forward, though, we're having conversations about child tax credits, but I'm with you in this current state. I am unbelievably fortunate that my role is remote. And so my child's here with me, when he's doing remote learning. But that is not the case. And what you're saying, that's what so many people are experiencing across the state. And we knew it, but we saw firsthand that school, not only is it important for the education that it brings to our youth, but it certainly is our #1 childcare provider in the state and across the country. And so we do need to be doing more. But I'd like to better understand if the programs we had implemented as a result of COVID applied to you, and if not, addressing that. If they did, well, then why didn't we get that information to you all?
And then with the children with remote, when they're doing a hybrid model, we are not aware of any programs right now that provide childcare on the days that the children are not in school. we were aware of some programs that were in effect at the very beginning of the lockdown, but we hadn't heard of anything since then.
Yeah, that's wonderfully helpful, because as Jillian said, I think it's about making sure we are not only, connecting the dots here, but also kind of keeping up the attention on how, we cannot have everyone get back into the workforce, especially all of the women who are unemployed and have had to reduce hours without true childcare infrastructure. And again, part of that we have to rely on our federal government for, but we want to do our best, to make sure, again, that what you're facing in the immediacy, that we're connecting you with the resources that are available. So we will, as Jillian said, making sure that we know that you're having challenges accessing anything is critical so that we can help you.
And I will just add, I totally agree with everything that Jillian and Kate said. And the only thing that I wanted to highlight, which is why these conversations are so valuable, is I didn't think about and haven't heard much about the hybrid piece and how difficult that makes it. So you may have them covered in a certain way when they're learning or occupied by school, but that hybrid piece, that's really important to highlight as well. Early on, I learned more about the programs that were for the younger children, for essential workers, but not the school-age children and not the hybrid piece. So thank you for highlighting that for us, because that's the type of information we need in order to be able to advocate for the programs and supports that are needed by all of you and us. Thank you.
I think that's the recurring theme here is, a lot of what's in place or has been in place historically, we're realizing firstly that there are gaps in the existing coverages, or gaps in the existing programs that we didn't realize were gaps until we're in the middle of the situation. And also for some of the supports that are available, it's based on network. It's based on people knowing and having resources, and access to the information. Very often through the Minority Business Network, we say, you don't know to ask for access to a room or to knock on the door if you don't even know that the building exists or where the building is located, right? So, I think one of the things we collectively have to work through is being able to get the resources to people, or at least the awareness of the resources to people.
May I ask a question? I'm interested in knowing, are the needs from aside from some of the networking pieces, which we've identified, what are the needs that you've identified, other needs within the minority business community, within this new part of the chamber, that make it unique from other majority businesses, if you will? What are the needs? What are some things that you have identified at this point?
Sure. So I'll talk about the impetus of the Minority Business Network here in West Hartford, and kind of some of the needs that we see, as existing concerns for us. So, as a resident of West Hartford, living in this town, it's an incredibly diverse town. It's the elementary school that my children went through prides itself on the fact that there are over 90 languages spoken natively by the students that attend the school. But when you look at the existing business networks, they're not representative of that diversity. And it's not through some malicious design. It's at least in the way I've tended to articulate it, is as humans, we tend to be kind of tribal. We look for people that we have commonalities with, because on some level we've realized that there's a safety in numbers, going back to our primitive mind state. So when you look at the business population and you walk into a given room or a given professional network, or as deals are being made, people are mentoring, coaching, and doing business with people who kind of remind them of themselves. And once again, very often not in a spiteful way. It's just our networks are what they are, and so very often Black professionals, Latinx professionals, Asian professionals, get left out of that group. So it becomes, as the recurring theme seems to be here, about expanding that network and expanding those opportunities. Letting people know that the room exists and bringing them into the room. So I think that tends to be one of the if I can articulate just one thing, I think that's the major issue is knowing that some of these things exist. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So do we have anyone else who was queued up to ask questions, Kate?
I believe Kristen Gorski has joined us as a panelist. I think you had something, she had something that she wanted to share.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Kristen Gorski, Town of West Hartford Economic Development Coordinator. I certainly appreciate this really great conversation, specifically kind of geared around how do we support businesses going into the legislative session, especially in terms of recovering from COVID and a lot of different processes as well as opportunities that we can provide our business community to be able to support them with continuity to get through. But as I would like to ask a question regarding recovery. So as someone who works specifically to understand opportunities that are available to support businesses, both from many different aspects, but most particular from a financial perspective, as you're moving into the session and trying to determine additional opportunities, I do fear that a huge component of recovery is obviously getting people back to work and getting businesses fully staffed and fully employed. I have a fear that some of the opportunities from a financial perspective that used to be available are no longer a tool in our toolbox. And some of the opportunities that may come about in this legislative session are more geared towards large businesses, attracting and recruiting large businesses versus the retention of small businesses, meaning, minimum 25 plus hiring, minimum, multi-million investment. So I would like to know what focus and how we can incorporate additional conversations or additional legislation that's more geared towards supporting the recovery of our small businesses and be able to get people back to work. In particular, making sure that those programs have an aspect where it definitely promotes minority and women-owned businesses. Thank you.
So I think a huge opportunity this legislative session is that we are going to be virtual. So in the past, you'd actually have to come to the Capitol building to testify when a bill was being heard. It's this whole networking piece again. For those who are linked to some type of association or in a union or participate with an advocacy group, they have more access to understanding when those bills are being heard, what bills are being heard, and when the public hearing is. What I think is a positive this in 2021 is that that process has gone completely virtual. And so there is an opportunity for small business owners, minority-owned businesses to testify at the legislature like never before, because it's all going to be done by lottery. You're going to be told when you're going, and you can log on by computer to testify on the importance of a bill, or, to your point, Kristen, on why a bill needs to be changed to include supports for minority-owned businesses and small businesses. And so all of us here, and Derek had to jump off because he had a childcare thing he needed to address, but all of us here in the delegation, e-newsletters can be emailed at any time. You can give us a call, you can text, and we, in our e-news, will be keeping you updated on the various bills that will be heard each week at the legislature. I'll stop there, and now I'm going to get it wrong again, but it's Tammy. Tammy, you're on Commerce, right, this session? So
I am.
Okay, so she'll have firsthand knowledge of what bills are being heard.
Well, thank you for sharing that information, Jillian. Kate, I think we had one more person who's queued up and had a question?
We do. Mr. Travis Bish, he is the owner of North Star Realtors and also one of our program sponsors for today. So Travis, if you are there. Oh, I don't know if he is. I'm having a hard time pulling up his video at the moment. Did we have his question in advance that we could run by the panel? I don't seem to be able to get his video on screen.
So the question posed by Travis Bish is, what is our plan if this continues? Projections are that things should let up in the spring or summer of 2021, but we may be looking at a more ongoing situation. So how are we preparing for this?
I think that we're doing things in a multifaceted way. First, the optimist in me wants to say that our vaccination program will be underway and that people will continue to follow the guidelines so that we can have a much better spring and summer. Warmer weather is going to be our friend as far as being able to reestablish, like, for instance, restaurants being outside and that kind of thing. But what we have to do is also continue to advocate really with the federal government piece of this, because we're going to need funding. We're going to need, to be able to support our businesses. We need funds from the state. We need funds that we can work with the town and be able to support what the business needs are, because this is a time unlike any other. We have to be realistic that we know our budgetary restraints as a state. So our federal partners are going to really we have to advocate and work with them and hope that they will hear us with this new administration. I'm also very optimistic that we will maybe have more of a program, a nationalized program, so that we all are very clear about the resources that we will be getting. But I think that will be some of the critical pieces.
As you mentioned vaccination, there was an additional question in the Q&A section, and it came from Maria Brown. She asks, as an essential minority-owned business, we remained open throughout the pandemic, purchased the necessary PPE, and instituted protocols for our employees to remain safe during COVID. We would like to have our employees vaccinated so that our business is not interrupted if someone gets sick. Will there be vaccination information or help for essential businesses? So she's inquiring about the resources that would be available for businesses in relation to vaccination.
So that's another piece where now we can take that information back, ask, and then loop back to you all. There is an entity that is looking at distribution, who the distribution goes to. I believe that they met today, and we might hear about 1B shortly, which is 1A was first and then 1B. So I don't have the answer at the tip of my tongue, but we can certainly get that back to you. And to tie it back into the previous question on what happens if this continues, and we know, it is continuing now, even in this next phase, right? Like, yes, the vaccines are coming out, but we've all been saying, like, we're still in this. Similar to what you were saying, Christopher, about, folks don't even know something exists. Why would they go looking for it? That's actually how I've felt for years about public policy. A lot of people just kind of assume a law is the way it is because that's the law, right? They never question it. That's why I went into public policy. I always asked questions. It annoyed my parents as a child, but it's gotten me to where I am. So that's our role as your state representatives and as Derek as your state senator. So hearing from you all what's working, what's not working, hearing these questions, then we can go back, ask the questions, provide the information, and then that's how change gets made. That's how laws get tweaked and policy altered. So to tie it all together, I'm happy to go back with my colleagues and figure out who is in 1B, and then who is the contact person? There must be a contact person in the state right now where you can reach out to figure out, hey, we want to get the vaccine. How can we get on the list? And so happy to get that information to folks.
That would be incredibly useful, because I know that it's, you know, a point of burning concern, particularly for the essential businesses in the area.
I would just reiterate, you know, kind of how we get through this really is, you know, that we really, you know, kind of trust each other and keep in this constant communication that Jillian and Tammy mentioned, because, you know, there is such kind of fast and furious decisions being made at every level, and you know, we want to be best informed from all of you. So, you know, that's what we're here for, to figure it out all together, to kind of make the best decisions for our community. So certainly don't view this as the one chance to bring up those questions. And as Jillian said, you know, we will send information out, but the questions from you all will make sure that we can make the best policy possible.
Absolutely. Once again, relying on your network. And you know, one of the things that we say at the Minority Business Network is, this is about a process, not an event, right? So if you don't get your questions answered today, you know, we will absolutely provide resources where you can reach out to us, and we will get you in contact with the panelists and provide them with the information they need to help serve the community. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, and we have received a couple of questions from Facebook. This one came from Craig Hansen. Any ideas how to infuse revenues to the rapidly depleting transportation fund?
That's a great question and a hotly debated topic here in the state. There have been proposals, as you probably know, in the last 2 years. I did support the toll proposal. It wasn't just tolls, it was a very robust proposal, but it included tolls, and that did not move forward. So going into this next legislative session, as the individual on Facebook mentioned, we know that there needs to be more funding for transportation. So I think that that ties into this bigger picture look that we need to have as a state on equitable taxation. Where are revenues coming from? Where are they going? Because when it comes to transportation, not only is it a safety issue, it's also impacts businesses, attracting small and large businesses, but workers to the state. Folks want to know that they can get to work in a way that supports their quality of life, right? And so there's so many elements that go into ensuring that our transportation infrastructure is strong. And so I do think it is part of this bigger picture this bigger picture conversation that we need to have, and that we will be having, as we discussed at the beginning of this conversation, on our recovery and how we make our taxation here in the state more equitable to fund the things that we need to fund.
I would like to say that I'd like to be, you know, take a little bit of Tammy's optimism a bit and say that I would like to think that in the incoming administration, you know, we might see opportunities for infrastructure funding that Connecticut and other states can take advantage of to really address some of our longstanding issues with our own depletion of our funds. So I'd like to think that that could complement what Jillian is talking about for our own budget decisions, because you know, we really, I think as not just in our own communities, but in our state, but across our country, infrastructure has been uninvested in. And, you know, there is a chance, I'm hoping with this new administration, to not only bring those dollars here, but really put people to work and address some of our climate change issues at the same time.
So one stone that slays, you know, several birds, as it were. I can say just from personal experience, moving here from New York, and that was one of the huge shocks to me was, you know, the change in infrastructure. I managed to go 27 years without a driver's license, you know, but it became a dire necessity when I moved to Connecticut. So when you look at, you know, all of the gaps that can be filled by expanding infrastructure, you know, creating jobs, creating an efficient way for people to get to and from the places they need to go, combating climate change, you know, just making an available resource is absolutely something that, you know, we should be looking into. At least that's my 2 cents on it. We had an additional question from Gary Doms via Facebook. Does anyone on the panel have any information related to the small business grant program administered by Connecticut's DECD? Virtually all of the small businesses that rent space at my business applied for $5,000 grants, and not a single one of them has received any information about the status of the program.
They didn't receive any updates about the status of the grant. I know that money went really quickly, but certainly there should have been some type of communication so that they would understand whether or not they received the funding. I would be happy to help connect them with DECD to see if we could get some type of answers, as even if the answer is that they don't have any more funding available. But that would be really, that would just be a respectful thing to have that information. That money did go very quickly, and we do know that recently with the stimulus package, there will be more funding that will be coming, but I'm not, I have to pull out the particulars of that, but I do know that there's, with the second round of funding with the PPP and the economic injury disaster loan, EIDL, there will be some funding available. But that the program that you're speaking of, I know the money has all been distributed, but you still should have some type of response. If you could put some information in the chat, I'll be happy to check into that, help you check into that situation.
So if we could get Gary's information over to Tammy, that would be great.
That'd be great, thank you.
And thank you for offering to help out.
Excuse me, Kate. Kate, can we bring Kristen back on? She does have some information about that.
The DCD.
Oh, excellent. I'll move her back.
About it, and she might be able to shed some light on it. Thank you.
Hello again. So yeah, in terms of the DECD, the $5,000 grant, they are a little bit behind in terms of distribution of that grant. I have spoken with several business owners who over the course of the last, honestly 24 hours have started to receive notifications. Now, that notification that you're receiving a grant will come directly from either, one or a combination of DECD as well as SoFi. I do know specifically some people have found the email from SoFi in their spam, so make sure you are looking through, or your businesses, Gary, are looking through their spam in every single folder just to see if they have some sort of notification from SoFi. They are trying to target to get out all notifications hopefully by the end of next week, but again, they're a little bit behind. They had anticipated to have all of that wrapped up by the end of 2020, but they're still actively working on that. For anybody that does have specific direct questions on whether they will be receiving a grant or not, I do suggest that they reach out directly to DECD. So there is a business recovery hotline that we can also put in the chat, but 860-500-2333. You can call that line directly, and a staff person from DECD will be able to provide you the most recent update in terms of whether you had qualified or will be receiving funds or not.
As always, you come through. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we had an additional question from Facebook. This one came from Anissa Tash. Can we talk a bit about the rise of the COVIDpreneurs and what can be done to support them? These are people who are looking to open a business, fill vacancies, and come across challenges. So people who are looking to start small businesses or engaging in a business venture during this pandemic. And are there any additional steps that are being taken to help businesses thrive for these up and coming COVIDpreneurs, as you put it?
I had never heard that term, so I'm really happy that it was explained. Now I'll start using it, so thank you.
That was a new one for me too.
So I would think, again, I mean, it's the networking, right? So connecting these folks to DECD and to the small business supports we already have in place, to networks like these, and then to their lawmakers, so then we can connect them with the services we already have in place for anyone who wants to open a small business, right? And then if there are unique challenges in, that present themselves as it relates to COVID and in this current climate, we can certainly follow up and talk through that. But I would start with what already exists in the state for anyone interested in opening a small business.
Absolutely, and I would look to my Chamber of Commerce to kind of help me with resources and information. I think this is a great place to get started, and those networks and connections. I mean, if there's a theme for today that is running through much of our conversation, it's about networking and resources, and I think this is a great place to get started.
Thank you for the plug, Tammy.
You're welcome.
So, we had an additional question from our resident baker, Naima at Crafts Baking. And I think this was a continuation on her question regarding the Eversource issue that she was having. So would love the opportunity to connect with someone at a state level regarding the regulatory practices, PURA, that allow Eversource to implement their current billing practices that are gravely affecting small business owners, especially in this economic climate. So I think it was more of a statement asking to connect with you directly than it was a question.
One thing I would also say is just to really echo what Jillian mentioned earlier about testifying, about really listening for these opportunities and making sure that we communicate out the opportunities that will be coming up this session. And making sure you put that information down in writing and put it, get into the lottery to speak, come to a public hearing, because those testimonies are valuable. That's how we learn about what you're experiencing, feeling. It helps to really shape the policies. So I would really recommend that you write a letter and really get closer to the issue and be prepared for a hearing that will be coming up soon this session. And we can, try and help figure out when some of that will take place. So there will be a calendar and updates, but I think that would be very useful to do. It's impactful, not just for you, but for so many others that are feeling the same way about the issue around utility prices and so forth.
And I'd say, as a member of that committee, if you want to send me an email to connect, then I can keep you posted on when those bills are coming up for a hearing. And so all of our emails are our first name plus our last name, which you can see up here on the Zoom, at cga.ct.gov. CGA is Connecticut General Assembly.ct.gov. And so if you send an email, I'm happy to connect and then loop you in when bills regarding PURA get introduced.
And I just want to say one little thing. There's a dot between our first and last name.
Oh, so it's first dot last.
Yes, first dot last.
We'll be sending it out as a follow-up. We'll make sure we include everybody's. We got it.
Well, yeah, it looks like we are butting up against time. So I want to thank you all. Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Tammy. It looks like Derek and Kate had to jump off, but I want to show our appreciation and extend our gratitude for you joining us today, for sharing your insights and sharing your enthusiasm and willingness to hear from your constituents, as well as to be a resource for your constituents. Were there any closing comments or thoughts that you wanted to share?
Just my pleasure. Thank you for having us today, and let's keep the conversation going.
I couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. And all the best as the minority business end of this continues to move forward. May you get more businesses and more information and continue to network throughout the community. But thank you so much for having us.
Once again, thank you for joining us. Chris, did you have any closing words?
Sure. I just, again, want to thank everybody. And I just want to thank our delegation. I've been in this role for just over 2 years, and you guys have just always been so accessible, so responsive, and today was a perfect example of that. When the committee came up with this idea for this event, I I said I would take on the responsibility of inviting you to join us, and I think within 2 hours, all 4 of you had committed that you were able to do it. So thank you for that. And I will just reiterate what our leaders said. If you've got a concern, the access is there to voice your concern, and you should do so. You'd be surprised how few people it takes to have a concern where action will be taken, and I've seen that over the years historically. I just want to thank Chris for his fantastic job. Once we got the microphone thing worked out, for moderating today. And thank you to everybody for those great questions that really spurred the conversation. You know, I think that this series is called A Conversation because it will continue. The plan is we will do one of these quarterly. If you do not already, please follow the Chamber's social media. If you're not getting our emails, just send a quick email to info@whchamber.com. We'll make sure we add you to the list so that you know of upcoming forums and similar type programs that we will be doing. Of course, I want to thank the Chamber staff, Kate Coates, who made sure the right person was on camera when people were speaking, which is no small task, and Jesse, who was doing closed counting and monitoring the chats there. So thank you very much for that. With that, I just want to lastly thank our sponsors again, our sponsors, the North Filters and Liberty Bank, and our technology sponsor, Westfield Bank. And I did mention the event tomorrow. If you are a restaurateur or are interested in the support that we are providing restaurants, you can check back at 10 o'clock. You can register on the Chamber's website, where we will have the 4 delegates again, along with Senators Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy. With that, certainly you can reach out to me at any time if you have any questions about the Chamber. My contact information, as is the staff, is on the Chamber's website, whchamber.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have an amazing day.
Thank you, everybody.